You can tell how someone really feels by looking at their eyes. And Johnny Depp's eyes have always told his story better than words ever could. Lately, something about them changed. In interviews, at fancy parties, even in courtroom cameras, fans noticed it. The smile was still there. The charm was still around. But his eyes told a story the world wasn't paying attention to. A story about battles he fought by himself, pain he hid behind a peaceful face, and the real truth buried under newspaper headlines. Only his biggest fans understood it. The quiet flash of sadness, the sparkle of never quitting, the silent message, "I'm still here." While other people saw a mystery, his fans saw the real meaning. Every look, every pause in talking, every stare said more than words ever could. Because sometimes the biggest truth isn't said out loud. It's shown. For many years, his eyes were how he communicated. In every movie, from Edward Scissorhands to Pirates of the Caribbean, Johnny didn't just act, he connected. His eyes showed emotions the movie lines could never explain. They could make you feel sad without him saying anything at all. One moment, soft and full of love. The next moment, troubled, haunted, and totally real. But off the movie screen, that same power stayed with him. In interviews, he almost never raised his voice. He didn't need to. A quick flash in his eyes said more than a whole press conference. When he smiled, his eyes never completely smiled along. Real fans noticed it. They always did. Because true supporters don't pay attention to all the drama. They watch for the truth. During his hardest times, when the news stories were louder than common sense, those eyes never fooled anyone. They looked tired, yes, but never defeated. Even without words, they told stories of being loyal, loving, and quietly strong. There was a fighter hidden under the gentleness. A message that said, "You can destroy my reputation, but you can't change what's true." That's what made him special. In a business where everyone pretends, Johnny's eyes stayed real. They never learned how to lie. They showed what it costs to be misunderstood. The weight of staying kind in a world that loves drama. Fans started taking screenshots, pausing at moments where his stare lasted too long, where emotions broke through the calmness. They saw something the world didn't see. A man still holding on to his dignity when it would have been easier to fight mean. Because people who felt real pain don't need to yell. They just look. And people who understand can feel it. There was a time when Johnny Depp's voice went silent. When the fun interviews and charming jokes faded into quietness after the storms. After the endless noise of newspaper headlines and courtroom drama, he just stopped trying to explain. The world talked too much. He chose stillness. But being quiet doesn't mean disappearing. During those years, Johnny showed up at art galleries, at music shows, at small fan meetings. And still, it wasn't his words people remembered. It was a look in his eyes. A quiet storm was living there. A man who had poured everything into his acting and lost almost everything else while doing it. He'd smile for the cameras, polite, kind as always. But the brightness behind those eyes had gotten a little dimmer. Only true fans saw it. They called it the look of someone carrying peace and pain at the same time. In those moments, it felt like his stare spoke to them directly. "Don't worry, I'm still here, just tired." The gossip magazines twisted stories, but his eyes never lied. They showed exhaustion, yes, but also refusing to give up. The kind that only grows when someone has survived something bigger than words. When he looked down for a moment before facing the camera flash again, fans noticed they understood. They saw the heaviness of being human in a world that feeds on big dramatic stories. He didn't fight back with interviews or official statements. He didn't yell or demand people listen. He let the noise burn itself out. And through all of it, his quiet way of being there became its own kind of strength. It was like he was saying, "You can misunderstand me, but you can't change who I am." Those silent years became a strange kind of poetry. Johnny started painting again, making music, filling his life with colors instead of words. Every picture he made felt like a secret message. Emotions poured out through art because words had stopped making sense. And slowly, fans learned how to listen in a new way. They didn't wait for explanations or press conferences anymore. They watched how his eyes got softer when a fan hugged him, how they lit up when he talked about his children, how they focused when he picked up a guitar. That was Johnny's way of communicating. Not through noise, but through just being present. His eyes told 1,000 hidden stories about surviving, about heartbreak, about quiet courage. When the world turned against Johnny Depp, it didn't happen quietly. Headlines screamed his name in big, twisted letters. Every TV channel had something to say. Every stranger had an opinion. The man once loved for being mysterious was now being painted as a villain. And through it all, Johnny barely said a word. He didn't fight back with anger. He didn't throw insults back at them. He just stood there calm, tired, but strangely not broken in a sea of blame and noise. He let his silence become his way of defending himself. But his eyes, they told a story the world didn't want to hear. At fancy red carpet events and courtrooms, camera flashes exploded in his face. But he didn't back away scared. The cameras caught everything. The slight sadness, the quiet hanging on, the pain that had already gone too deep for tears. Real fans spotted it right away. Sometimes the eyes don't cry, one fan wrote, because they've already cried too much. The news media saw a man with no expression. His followers saw a broken heart mixed with grace. His stare held opposite things at once. Losing and refusing to lose, sadness and power. Those eyes had brought movie characters to life across worlds. But now they carried the weight of his own truth. They weren't begging people to feel sorry for him. They were asking people to understand. While the world pointed fingers at him, millions stood quietly beside him. Not through making noise, but through believing. They watched every photo, every glance, and said, "He doesn't have to prove anything. We see it." It was a kind of loyalty you can't buy. Born from years of connection between an artist and people who truly saw his soul. And as months passed, something powerful happened. The more he stayed quiet, the louder his eyes spoke. They became symbols, not of losing, but of quietly resisting. The gossip papers try to break him. But you can't break someone who already learned how to survive quietly. He walked through storms without looking down at the ground. And even in pain, there was dignity. A rare kind, the kind that doesn't need to shout, "I didn't do it." It just looks you in the eye and says, "You'll know the truth when it's time." And eventually, the world did know. The noise started to fade. The truth started rising to the surface. There was something different about Johnny Depp when he came back to being seen in public. Gone were the tense shoulders, the heavy pauses, the tired smile that used to hide 1,000 words he never said. This time he looked lighter, not because the world had changed, but because he had. His silence was no longer a shield to protect himself. It had become peace. At movie festivals, the cameras still flashed. The crowd still shouted his name, but the energy was different. He didn't seem like he was walking into a battle anymore. He was walking into where he belonged. The same eyes that once showed exhaustion now sparkled with calm confidence. It was like the storm had finally passed. Not because he won the battle, but because he stopped needing to prove anything. That change became impossible to miss. The world saw it. The quiet confidence, the soft steadiness. He wasn't trying to act like the old Johnny anymore. The mysterious rebel or the suffering artist. He was just being himself. His eyes didn't hide pain now. They showed strength. A man who had walked through fire and learned how to carry warmth instead of ashes. Fans flooded social media with posts and videos. He's glowing again. His eyes are at peace. He made it through. These weren't just comments. They were a group sigh of relief. The people who once watched his heartbreak on live TV were now watching it heal. And that healing wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, graceful, almost like poetry. When Johnny Depp finally spoke after years of silence, he didn't give a big dramatic speech or an angry statement. Instead, his words were simple, almost like poetry. "I speak through my work," he said quietly. And just like that, everything made sense. For Johnny, silence was never giving up. It was art. Every expression, every paintbrush stroke, every quiet glance became part of language only a few could truly understand. While others demanded explanations, he chose creating. He painted, played guitar, and acted not to prove anything, but to express everything. In a world obsessed with shouting opinions, Johnny's holding back felt revolutionary. His silence wasn't empty. It was full of meaning. Each time he picked up a paintbrush or stepped onto a stage, it was like he was whispering his truth through color, rhythm, and emotion. Real art doesn't scream, one fan commented. It whispers, and that's exactly what he did. Look closely at his paintings. Faces caught between sadness and light. Eyes that seem to know too much. They're not just portraits, they're confessions. Look at his music. Soulful, not rushed, alive with memories of the past. That's where he hides the stories he'll never tell out loud. When the world judged Johnny Depp by headlines, his true fans judged him by his heart. They didn't need breaking news, courtroom clips, or gossip channels to tell them who he was. They had already seen the truth in his eyes, in his art, in the way he treated people. Long before fame turned mean, while the media shouted, "He's finished," fans quietly built a wall of love around him. They wrote letters that started with, "We believe you." They drew portraits filled with those same soulful eyes that had once made them laugh, cry, and dream. Some mailed poems. Some left candles outside theaters, and others flooded social media with the same message. We're still here. When Johnny came back to the stage, guitar in hand, smile shaking but real, the clapping was thunderous. It wasn't just noise. It was like one giant heartbeat. Every cheer said, "You survived. We never left." Fans cried openly, some holding handmade signs that said, "Welcome home, Captain." That night, the crowd didn't see a movie star. They saw a man who had been broken and rebuilt by love. Today, when Johnny Depp steps into a room, there's a quiet shift in the air. Not the roar of paparazzi camera flashes or the craziness of headlines, but a calm, almost sacred hush. The man, once haunted by noise, now walks in peace. His eyes, once heavy with exhaustion and guarded sorrow, have changed. They no longer beg to be understood. They simply are steady, warm, free. These days, Johnny lives for creating, not correcting. He paints for hours, faces of legends, friends, and forgotten souls. Each brushstroke pulsing with emotion. His studio smells of turpentine and memory. It's not about fame anymore. It's about expression. The same eyes that once faced judgment now stare at canvases filled with color, rebirth, and light. You can almost feel his healing in every shade. Then there's his music on stage with a guitar. He's not Hollywood's mystery man. He's just Johnny, laughing between chords, losing himself in rhythm, unfiltered and human. When he closes his eyes to sing, there's no pretending, no act, just a man speaking through melody, surrounded by people who never stop believing. Those eyes that once reflected heartbreak now shine with peace. Not because life suddenly became perfect, but because he learned to embrace imperfection. He's not hiding pain anymore. He's learned to live with it, to turn it into art. Every wrinkle, every quiet smile tells a story, one not of tragedy but transformation. Johnny Depp's greatest transformation wasn't winning back fame. It was winning back himself. His eyes tell that story now, softly but clearly. The pain is gone. The lessons remain. And the man who once spoke through silence now lives through art. The eyes that once carried storms now carry peace. If eyes could speak, Johnny Depp's have already told the story. Through every rise and fall, they never stopped reflecting truth, quiet, honest, unshaken. His journey wasn't about fame or redemption. It was about finding peace after the storm. And when the world shouted, he simply looked back, calm, knowing, free. To every fan who never stopped believing, who saw pain behind the smile and strength behind the silence, this story is yours too. You didn't just watch him survive. You helped him heal. Because sometimes the loudest truth isn't spoken. It's seen in the eyes of a man who refused to lose himself.